Hello, welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight or today. I am Waukesha Newton. I am with Family Values at Work. I am the Child Care Organizer State Lead. And today, welcome to our Now That You Know live stream for autism and paid leave. Thank you for taking the time out to just join in this conversation, this important conversation. I am going to take the time now to let our guests introduce themselves. We have here with us today Garrett Denning and Joella Streibel. So if you could all just give us a quick update or quick, let us know who you are and where you're coming from and how you are excited to talk about autism. I will start with Garrett.
Hi, my name's Garrett Denning. I coming at you from La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I work at Western Technical College. I myself love the chance to get to about this topic in general, just because of my own neurodivergent, autistic, and ADHD identities. Really just a chance to have conversations that didn't exist when I was growing up. So just to see how far we've come is very, very cool.
Thank you, Garrett. Joella.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joella Streibel. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am also coming at you from La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I work as the Public Affairs Regional Coordinator with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin. And this topic is important to me. I'm raising a teenager who's 13 years old, who is autistic and neurodivergent. And has recently had some medical issues. So this is a topic that is very timely and relevant to my current experience.
Thank you. And for those of you out there who do not know, we have this Now That You Know series. And with this particular series today, we're talking about autism and paid leave. And we're talking about the neurodivergent community and the need for paid leave and care for those families who need in those communities. And we're just ready for this good discussion. Hoping that we can educate people, educate the community, let them know how they can advocate for autism and paid leave. And just hear those voices of people who are experiencing these and can let us know what's more that we can do. I'm honestly, I have family that has children or dealing with autism. I have friends, but nothing personal. So every time I get to hear something, to know more, to learn more, to know what I can do to help, to advocate, is always a good thing for me. So again, I appreciate you all. So we're going to jump right on in with some conversation so we can educate the people out here. I just have a couple questions, or maybe a few. So we are excited to discuss autism and things like that. So April is Autism Awareness or Acceptance Month. What's the difference? What should we know about awareness or acceptance? What's the difference? Garrett, do you have an answer for us?
Sure. So I think awareness is a great first step, right? In terms of just understanding what is out there, different myths about autism, like you can't get it from vaccines. It is just a different neurotype, or the way the brain works, basically. And kind of that moving forward. Acceptance is kind of going that extra little step to realize that we really are I think the world has become quite aware that autism exists. 1 in 30 people exist somewhere on the spectrum. And so a lot of people are connected to this kind of neurotype, whether it be within themselves or someone else. But acceptance allows us to kind of recognize that there's there's really like nothing wrong, and break the stigma that's existed for so long about what autism looks like and what that means. And then I always like to go an extra step and go Justice Month, and what does it mean to like go even further and find ways to like figure out how do we have conversations like this, right? How do we allow for better a better way of life for autistic people, and what exists that is keeping us from that, and how do we change it?
Very interesting. Joelle, you have anything to add?
Well, I echo everything that Garrett had to share. And I think part of when I think about awareness around autism, like Garrett alluded to this, that we're aware that autism exists and that autistic people exist and are part of our families and our lives and our communities. And I think it's a lot of challenging some of those stereotypes. I recall when I was growing up, there was a movie called Rain Man, and that was everyone's perception of what autism looked like. It was white, it was male, it was exceptional. And so, really expanding our awareness of what autism looks like and how it presents in people of different genders, different races, and different abilities. And also increasing our awareness of how our society and the way our society has evolved has become more and more disabling to autistic people, and really becoming aware of how we as friends and allies and family members of autistic people can do better to advocate for spaces and environments that are more compassionate and welcoming and just less hostile to autistic people.
You bring up a point, just makes me think. How do you think the media portrays people with autism or families dealing with autism? Do you feel like it's in a positive light? Is it bringing good views, good thoughts, things to the autism community?
I think in so many ways it's varied, right? And we see a lot of this with any kind of marginalized identity, where we have really good portrayals sometimes and really bad portrayals sometimes. And I think the big difference is largely like who's behind that like writer's desk, who's behind the camera, what does that look like, and what is their connection to the community. Recently we just had, I guess not recently, but maybe a year or so back, one of the first things that come to my mind, Joella talking about Rain Man, is looking at how the singer Sia created this movie called Music, and it was all about this like very white cis granted girl with autism, but it was very problematic and very stereotypical, to the point where because it wasn't a person, an autistic person portraying that character themselves, it played like all these mannerisms were like somehow making fun of the community, and there was a big backlash there. And so we have things like that. We have things like where they're not necessarily named, like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, where it's just kind of this like whole nerd joke that he is autistic, he is very strict and like with routine, and everything needs to be a certain way. He's non-sexual. just every kind of idea that you have within that. But then there's been really great great portrayals from within the community. The and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. I wonder, Joella, if you can think of it. There's that show on Netflix that's very very well done, very well portrayed, and it comes from the community itself. But really, I think all it comes down to a lot of the time is who's behind that camera, who's given the chance, and how intentional are the people, if they don't hold that identity, in making sure that they're doing that identity justice.
I'm not sure what show you're talking about, Garrett, and I wish I did, because it sounds like I would enjoy watching it. And I guess I echo, just the emphasis on ensuring that the autistic community is at the helm, right, in the driver's seat when we're looking at media representations, because so often what we see coded as autistic is autistic people who are upset or who are not being accommodated, or they're being portrayed in a light of like, this is what autism looks like when a person is maybe having an uncomfortable sensory experience. And we don't necessarily see representations of autistic joy and autistic love and autistic sexuality in a healthy way. And so really, like Garrett said, having those images guided by autistic people. And from the standpoint of a caregiver, I think a lot of times that is portrayed as parents of autistic people are portrayed as martyrs, or people who are really, it's a tragedy or something like that. And as opposed to really emphasizing just regular moments with a family that has an autistic person in it, and the joy and even the mundane aspects of autistic lives. We see that in media representations of other sorts of families and that sort of thing. So I think just the idea of like the whole, the word spectrum comes to mind, the whole spectrum of the autistic experience, and really letting that shine.
Really, real quick, if I could. First, I remembered the name of the show. It's Atypical. And then also, I think you have a really good point, Joella, especially with the families and how it's portrayed as this like horrible thing that they're martyrs to go through. And what happens with that, even with the news, we have that kind of thing. And what happens in these cases is that disabled people, including autistic people, are often like, especially those with higher needs, are often like not seen as fully human, to the point that there is a disability day of mourning that recognizes all the people who have been killed by their caregivers because of their disability. And the way that is portrayed in media over and over again is that these poor caregivers, what they must have gone through to get to this level, that they needed to essentially kill their loved one, or their person they care for. And I'm sorry, I probably should have trigger warning that, but that is a very real thing in
we
these
definitely
circles.
understand. And it's happening, and it is real. We are seeing it in the news and the media. I do want to kind of go back a little bit. So neurodivergent, neurodiverse, that is a new word for a lot of people. What exactly is that, and how does it? Is it a part? Is it a type of autism? Are there other neurodivergent things out there we should know about?
Sure. So this is my go-to in terms of questions. I actually just hosted a neurodivergent and higher education symposium here, but basically neurodivergent and neurodiverse are two different things, but they come at it from kind of the same area. And so neurodiverse is basically, if you think of things like biodiversity, it's kind of the same thing, only with like brain type. And so everybody has a different type of brain, in the way that we think and the way that we function. Nobody necessarily, it's like a fingerprint almost, um, that we function just a little bit differently than another person say would function. And so neurodiverse just kind of alludes to the various ways that all of our brains function. And neurodivergent is when your brain functions kind of different enough from what society views as typical, um, to be seen as kind of like quote unquote abnormal. Um, and I use that word in a reclaiming process, but autism is definitely one of those. One of the diagnoses that can fall under that neurodivergent spectrum. ADHD is another one. Um, ADHD, which is a combination of autism and ADHD, which is really common, which I have, falls under that. Different learning disabilities, different like dyslexia, um, and different sometimes different mental illnesses, depending on whether that person like identifies with the term neurodivergent. And I think it's always kind of like whether that person identifies with it that I'd ever say like anything absolutely falls under it. But those are kind of the core like categories of it.
Thank you, Gary. That was very helpful, and it did break it down for me. Um, so I remember you mentioning something earlier about the percentage of people with autism or families coping with autism. Do we know the percentage of what we're dealing with?
I mean, I think it is that 1 in 30. I've seen 1 in 60 as well, but I believe current CDC levels are 1 in 30. And there's a lot of talk about why, right? Because we've gone from like 1 in 2,000 or something when I was diagnosed as a kid, to that higher level. And a lot of it is just us getting so much better at diagnosing, at understanding, at figuring these things out. But kind of like Joella alluded to earlier, we're really good at diagnosing and recognizing autism in certain communities. So white, male, cisgender communities that really have um, all of the access that you could possibly need in a lot of cases to care. And what we don't see as much is those those communities that don't have the same level of access to care. And they usually get diagnosed with something else before finding out later on, or self-diagnosing, which is absolutely valid.
Just the what do you tell to those families that are having those just been recently diagnosed and don't know what to do? What are those conversations you have with those families?
I can jump in on this one. And my answer to this is strongly influenced by how people responded to me when my child was diagnosed, which was quite upsetting to me. A lot of people told me how sorry they were, and that it was perfectly okay for me to grieve. And those were some of the responses I got, which I was really horrified by, because I was excited to have a diagnosis of autism. I was excited that we had a pathway of understanding and learning how to accommodate our child. So my response when somebody tells me, I think my child might be autistic, we're going through this diagnostic process, is congratulations. Like, good for you for pursuing that diagnosis and for doing, being a good parent to meet the needs of your child. Because there is such a narrative that it's a tragedy or something to be grieved, when it's really, my child wasn't a different child. There's some of these narratives about, like, your child was stolen from you by autism, and my kid is who my kid's always been. I just now have a better understanding of who they are and how their brain works, and how I can help guide them through advocating for themselves and their needs. So for me, it's congratulatory, and just to offer myself as a resource, because I'm aware of so many of those negative narratives out there, and I try to offer an alternative to that.
Yes, thank you. Garrett, were you saying something?
I think everything Joella really said. The biggest thing for me is, like, the world really, like, continues, and I think, like, it's really expressed with, like, the reaction that you got, Joella, is, like, it's really organized in a way where, like, if you don't fit within it in a certain way, that's viewed as something to be, like, to be somehow ashamed of, or, like, as some sort of tragedy. But I keep wanting to challenge people and be like, I have done so much in my life to be able to fit into a world that does not fit me. What is the world doing? What is this, like, rest of the world doing in order to fit to me? Because I can guarantee you there's obviously 1 in 30, there's more of me out there, right? I'm not, like, the sole voice or, like, a look of autism, obviously. But, like, there's many of us out there that have had to change ourselves so much for the rest of the world. And to me, that means the rest of the world isn't doing a good job for the people in it, including people who aren't autistic, because they may not fit in other ways. So I just think we need better. And so, like, any kind of, like, expression of that to, like, to families, to people who are going through it, like, I think that's real.
Yeah, it is. It is real. And tell me, how do you think having access to paid leave, paid sick days help the neurodivergent community, those dealing and coping with autism, having those paid sick days or paid leave? How would that have helped, you, Joella, with raising a child, or you, Garrett, as being grown up with this, with autism? How would having that access help you? Joella, if you want to join.
Sure, I can jump in. Yeah, I think I'm fortunate to work for an organization that has pretty generous paid leave. And so I the way that has benefited me is that I am able to take time off of work when my child needs to have a medical appointment, or even if my child experiences bullying at school. And so even if I need to take a day because my kid had a really bad day at school yesterday and just cannot face it today. So being able to be there. And I think a lot when I have those moments, or my child went through a really scary medical experience earlier this year, and I had to take quite a bit of time off of work. And knowing that I had the support of my employer to prioritize my family and my child's needs was a huge relief to me, to know nobody's looking at me like, why does she get this time off? Or, um, you know, just having a lack of understanding around that. So just having that support has been huge in, as somebody who takes a lot of pride in my work and my job and wants to show up and do a good job, just knowing that I work for an organization that understands that and doesn't see me as less than because I prioritize taking care of my child. So really just the ability to be there for my kid, to not have to force them to go to school, if they're not in a place where going to school is what's best for them on a given day.
Yeah, I think for me, I also have a job that has been quite good with the amount of paid leave that I get. And I know that's not the situation for everyone, but for me, there's a lot of work that I do just to exist in the world on a day-to-day basis outside of my little apartment where I can be me. I don't live with anyone besides my cat, and she judges the way any cat would judge, but I don't understand cats, so I don't have to hear that judgment. Um and but like outside, like there are layers that I have to put on over and over again. There's a mask that I have to put on a day-to-day basis. And one thing that get a little bit of disability theory in here for a second in how I describe this, but there's an idea called spoon theory, and it talks about like how you start your day with so many spoons that you have to go through your day, and each task involves a spoon or maybe more than one spoon depending on how you're doing that day. And at some point you just run out. And masking for me, like putting on that, like every day having to talk to people and just kind of like navigate different social interactions, deal with like a lot of deadlines because I'm a grant writer, so everything is deadlines. All that involves a lot of energy that I just don't necessarily have. It's not in how I naturally function. And so if I don't have time off to be able to like really just decompress and just like almost like hide myself away from the world for a little while, I go into a burnout mode where like not only like do I experience every burnout symptom that other people experience, my autism becomes like much more apparent because I can't mask anymore. And that's when I tend to get in trouble at previous workplaces. Because I can't like follow basic like, well, I can't like, I I don't have those like level of niceties that I need to have to like get me through the day. And so having time off means literally for me to just be able to hide away, decompress, build myself back up into a world that doesn't necessarily understand or appreciate how I function.
Yeah, and it just kind of makes me think about children who are not able to speak or, bring that out what they need, and having the families or the whoever's with that child, needing that time to be with that child when they need that time to that mask on, or they need to mask off, or whatever the situation may be, and those families are not able to take off to care, for that child. It really makes me sad to think about that child is put in that situation and that caregiver is put in that situation. Yes. So what would you tell, now that people are aware of neurodivergent, the difference, autism, coping with autism, what should we do now? How can we continue to advocate for this?
I'm coming from like this is kind of like cop out answer for coming from an educational institution, but I think like continuing to grow, continuing to learn, the fact that people are here and listening to this is a great first step. But it's always a first step, and like we know that like we've talked about here how like the face of autism is male, it's white, it's relatively like middle to upper class. And so like finding different voices, finding different ways to educate yourself about like what autism looks like in someone who doesn't look like me, and whatever different ways that is. Um, and like how that experience works for them, because when you have to add like so many other identities, I can talk about like bringing down my mask, other people can't, because at the end of the day they're also like they're also black and brown, or like trans women, or something like that that makes them much more vulnerable. And so continuing to educate and find different ways and different voices, finding the nonverbal community, who actually have quite a lot to say about what it is to be autistic and what it is to be constantly underestimated over and over again in their lives and talked over. So finding these other voices and seeking them out and just learning as much as you can more.
Yeah, and I agree. The more we can increase just awareness and education around what autism looks like and what it looks like for families and caregivers of autistic people, and being more expansive in our understanding, as it relates to paid leave, more expansive in our understanding of why someone might need some time off for reasons that might not look to you as a neurotypical person as like justified. Um, and just thinking about, the focus of this is thinking about paid leave and advocating for paid leave for everyone. Garrett and I talked about how we both work for organizations where we're relatively supported. What I didn't say is that I use pretty much all of my paid leave on caregiving and medical appointments, which means that I don't have vacation time, right? Like I don't get time off for a vacation because I've used all my time off for caregiving reasons. And additionally, my husband is a small business owner. He doesn't have any paid leave. So when he's taking time to care for our child, there's no income, and so paid leave for small business owners and paid leave policies that protect everyone, regardless of whether you're working at a more, progressive organization or you're working in the food service industry or in retail, so that we all have more equitable experiences with that. And to carry on what Garrett was saying, listening to autistic people and believing autistic people about their experiences and their needs, and shaping, our policies and our understandings around the experiences of autistic people and people who are impacted.
Yes, all that. And let the people know how they can reach you, or any program that you are supporting, how they can support that individual program or advocacy group that you're working with. Well, is it me?
We're playing chicken with the muted microphones here. Yeah, I work with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin. So our website is www.ppawi.org. If people want to get involved, I specifically work in Western Wisconsin. Of course, there are Planned Parenthood affiliates in most states, and we tend to do a lot of cross movement work because we understand that reproductive justice and reproductive health impacts all forms of justice, and it means that we deserve to have a healthy and safe world when we choose to bring children into the world. So really, any sort of string of justice that you're tugging on supports the whole movement.
Sure. And I'll just say, because the only thing I can think of that I would promote right now, currently I'm still working on a website and social media for, but I am part of a small disability justice group here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So looking at the western region of Wisconsin again, but just promoting disability justice principles to the greater outside world of what that looks like. And so email is lacrossedjcollective.org. But I'd also just shout out somewhere to actually learn what that whole thing is all about, is sinsinvalid.org, I think it is, .org. I hope it's .org and not .com. Try both. But they are very much the founders of what disability justice looks like, and what how we live in community with each other, and when we have disability. And so a lot of anything that I've said, if it rings true to you in some way, I've been influenced by them in great many ways. So if it hits you nicely, they're an amazing organization to look out there for. And it's all started by BIPOC, queer, disabled people.
Thank you. And I just want to thank again Garrett and Joella for taking time, telling us your story, your advice, helping us fight for paid leave and bring awareness to autism. I do want to invite the audience to also go to familyvaluesatwork.com to get more involved, to find out what's going on in your states involving paid leave or anything else like that. You can sign up on familyvalues.com to volunteer. We'll really appreciate that. Just now that you know about autism, and we again encourage you to continue to advocate for the communities that need it. And we really do appreciate your time. Thank you.